Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ. Welcome to today's user share webinar. I've got a lot of cool scripting stuff to talk about today. But before we dive into that, just want to make you aware of some events coming up. Tomorrow we have a demo with a new company that hasn't done a webinar with CUGC yet, so I'm excited to see what they're all about, ZTIM. So be sure to check that out. Also, we've got lots of local events still going on all over the place. We can't gather in person, but we're still gathering online, so it's still fun. And the next XL event we have coming up is the Northeast. That's on June 10th. You can see our speakers. We've got a lot of great content, lots of CTAs, and just really great stuff coming out on that one as well. So I put a link in the chat to our events calendar. All of this stuff is available to you there, so definitely check it out. All right, so we're going to be talking about scripting and micro apps today, and I know it's going to be a solid hands-on hour of information coming at you, so let's get down to it. Just a reminder, we are recording today's presentation. You'll get a link to that recording tomorrow. It's going to come in an email from GoToWebinar, so be on the lookout for that. Also, please put your questions in the chat menu at any time. We'll take them as we can throughout the presentation. And then at the end, because it's Star Wars Day, and I'm a Star Wars nerd, we have some trivia questions for you. We're giving away 3 pairs of Citrix branded Apple AirPods. So I've got some trivia questions. Whoever gets the first person to get one of each question right, I think I said that right, we'll win a pair of AirPods. So do stick around for that. And I will have a link to a survey for you as well towards the end.
And Stephanie, you said to put
Yes.
questions in the chat. Don't you mean the
Sorry, in the
questions?
Q&A.
Yeah.
Well, you know what the attendees see is different than what we see. So they have
Okay.
one
Okay.
box.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So yeah, so put it in the question panel. I'm actually not sure what it's labeled as on the attendee side. Okay, so I would like to welcome back to the webinar stage, Pat Patterson from Citrix. Hi, Pat.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And
All
Pat is,
right,
oh,
go on.
sorry, I was going to
No,
introduce Alex and Cassio. Pat has with him today also Alex Zoll and Cassio Helden from A2K Partners. They're going to be on talking about all of this scripting awesomeness. And then keeping an eye on your questions is someone who knows a thing or two about scripting himself, the great Carl Webster. So, hey, Carl.
Hey, Stephanie.
All right, guys, I'm going to hand things right over to you. I will be back later on to run the trivia, and I'll just keep an eye on things from behind the scenes. So here comes the screen, Pat.
hey,
There you go.
show this window. Okay, so everybody should be seeing my beautiful teal slide that matches my t-shirt. Excellent. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. And actually, Stephanie will be running the same polls as usual. So you'll be helping us out with that as well. So don't disappear to make a cup of tea quite yet. I'm Pat Patterson. I'm the Director of Developer Evangelism here at Citrix. You can reach me on Twitter or email. I'm always very happy to get feedback, answer questions, anything to do with Citrix. And I'm joined today by Alex Zahl and Cassio Helden from A2K Partners. So Alex and Cassio, why don't you just introduce yourselves and what you do at A2K?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Pat. I'm Alex Zoll. I am one of the founders of A2K Partners. We were actually one of the original partners of the Sappho acquisition, which kind of brought the intelligence aspect into the Citrix world. So we've been with this technology for close to 3 years, I believe. So we've watched it go from on-prem and semi-private cloud to multi-tenant cloud and all the wonderful things that Citrix has done with it. And then I'll let Cassio introduce himself. He's one of our principal architects, and he's been with the technology for just a little over a year.
Yeah, hello, I'm Casio, and as Alex said, I'm the main architect in terms of microapp development for HOK part.
Okay. And Alex, this is where you get an opportunity to just take a minute and just give us an overview of what A2K is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So myself and my partners have been in business for over 20 years, off and on in different companies that we built. And so we kind of focus on cloud companies, cloud services companies specifically. And so we look for, top edge technology that's kind of really pushing the thresholds of usability for customers and getting their businesses done. And so we decided to start this company to partner up with Sappho. And as soon as Citrix bought it, we came along with it. So we've built quite a few companies in the past, and this is hopefully one of our last go rounds to take a company to the moon. And we're really excited to be here.
Awesome. Great. So what we're going to cover today is really, I've got about 4 slides total, and we've done 2 of them. I'm going to talk about what a microapp actually is. I'm going to assume that quite a few people on this call kind of have seen this technology before, but there's a little bit of level setting there. And then I'm going to talk about why script a microapp. We've talked about microapps in the past as being this very declarative, low-code, no-code technology, and now we're talking about scripting. So I'm going to join the dots there, and then I'm going to walk you through the tutorial that will be coming out in just a few days to help you build your first microapp script. And before we jump in, I would like to run a poll. So Stephanie, could you launch the first poll, and we'll ask people a question. Okay, so just so that we know who we're talking to, what's your role? And yeah, I'd be really interested actually in anybody that doesn't fall into one of these 4 kind of broad categories. So feel free to let us know in the chat so that we can see that. I don't know, I certainly would have to hit other, I guess, as developer evangelist. Okay. All right, so interesting. Okay, so we've got, yeah, it's quite pretty clear. Administrators and architects are the bulk of the audience. We've got a few developers, a few folks on the cloud ops, DevOps side. So that's really, really useful to know. And this is, this is a very administrator-friendly technology on the whole. It's much more about knowing the business case and knowing the API that you're wanting to connect to than developing software as such. And if we run the second poll, I'd really like to know, what kind of relationship do you have with Citrix? Are you a customer, some kind of partner, or even are you a Citrite? We often have a reasonable group of Citrites in the house. So let's give people a chance to vote there. All right, it's fun because I can see the numbers mounting up here as people vote. So as people vote, Alex, would you say that, which side of that divide would you put A2K on? Are you an ISV or an SI, or a bit of both?
A little bit of both.
Right. Okay, so we have, wow, over 2/3 of Citrix customers, and then yeah, some SIs, some ISVs, and a few Citrites in the house, and then 2 people who have more interesting relationships. Okay, independent consultant. Right. Okay, so let's have a look at what a microapp actually is. So the whole idea of a microapp is, we're all dealing with more and more applications. Many of them are SaaS based. We get to this situation where we might have a I don't know, a dozen browser tabs. That's probably understating it for a lot of people, but we're constantly dipping in and out of these applications, these browser tabs. We're picking up information from one and sending it to another. We're checking our email, clicking links in email to go do approvals. And the whole idea of microapps is to try and cut through some of that distraction and busy work and bring those applications into one flow within Citrix Workspace. And so the whole idea of a micro app, the micro part of it is that you expose a single slice of functionality in a micro app. And here on the right, this is, I don't think I'm going to get into trouble with anybody at Citrix for this. This is our micro app to request time off through Workday. So if I'm in, when I'm in Citrix Workspace, I can go book a day off, a week off, without having to fire up Workday and log in and navigate through 3 clicks into the application there. It's just there as an action in Citrix Workspace. Similarly, I can just go in and see my balance, or it might give me a notification that I've got a day off coming up. So microapps provide this, expose this slice of functionality, and we refer to that backend system, the SaaS app, or it can be an on-prem application, as the system of record. So it's really important to realize here that we're really just bringing a slice of that system of record. We're not making yet another data store. And the microapp service maintains a cache for performance. So when you access any of the functionality, it's coming from a local cache. It's not making thousands of API calls a day into the backend service. So we write a synchronization. We set up a synchronization with that system of record. And then when we take actions, such as requesting a day off, we write data back into that system of record and into the cache at the same time. So it's conceptually, it's a pretty straightforward idea here. We're just trying to take those frequently used tasks and bring those to the user's workspace. And we're absolutely not trying to recreate Workday or ServiceNow or Salesforce in these micro apps. You're still going to go there when you want to dive deeper.
So Pat, I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
Where do the users see these micro apps? Do the users interact directly with the micro app?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, they do. So typically, your users are going to be using Citrix Workspace. So that's where they're going to be able to fire up desktops, applications, from CVAD. And it's also where they have this feed of information from micro apps. So the model here is that your admin, your developer, or a partner might configure these micro apps. So we have a number of templates, so off-the-shelf systems like Workday and Salesforce and so on. So as an admin, you would say, okay, I want to be able to look up Salesforce opportunities and do time off and do ServiceNow tickets, and then they actually appear for the user. So they become the user's way of interacting with those different systems without having to leave their desktop, their Citrix Workspace.
So if you create tens or hundreds of micro apps, isn't my workspace screen going to get cluttered?
It can do, but what you can do is you can work to expose micro apps to only the users they're relevant to. So they have a subscription model, okay, and then you can group them as well. And part of the intelligence in Citrix Workspace with intelligence is that it will highlight the most frequently used actions automatically. So those ones you use all the time will appear on the Workspace home, and we'll kind of get to that. I'll show you the Workspace in a little while. but then you'll be able to dive down into the big list if you want to do that once in a quarter activity. Yeah, but good questions. Okay, so for the basics of microapps, I can't recommend anything higher than the Microapp learning journey. So this has been around for about 6 months. We released it, I think, towards the end of last year for Converge. We certainly refreshed it for Converge. And this gives you all the basics of writing a microapp. And the initial example is hooking up to Jira. So reading tickets from Jira and then showing those on screen. So really, this gives you that base level education about microapps, how microapps and integrations are related, and creating those basic integrations into web services like Jira. So I always say that's a prerequisite. So I'm going to work through the tutorial for you. If you're going to work through this tutorial in the future, definitely do the learning journey first before you get onto scripting, because that's foundational material. Okay, so why script microapps? Now, you know, when microapps were introduced, they could connect to a wide variety of systems, but those systems had to talk JSON over HTTP. They had to have this RESTful model, and they had to be fairly regular interface, in that they could maybe have one API, one endpoint, so one HTTP URL that you might retrieve a list of records from and be able to post to another URL to create a record. And Alex, I know that when you started writing microapps, there was, you know, a good population of pretty regular RESTful services, but that wasn't always the case, right? You had to do some heavy lifting of your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, RESTful doesn't necessarily mean that everybody follows the same rules and structures. So the payloads may be different, et cetera, and we've had quite a variety of REST API implementations. Some of them passing tokens and basic auth kind of structures, and so having the ability to script before the scripting capabilities came on board, we used to have to do like Lambda functions to transform it into something that could be consumed.
Right. And so we last year we released a feature called Script Transformation. So here again, you're declaring your endpoints. You're saying, okay, this is where the API is, and I'm going to get some response. And we gave you the opportunity to take the response, the JSON response, and change the shape of it. So maybe extract just a subset of the data. Maybe it arrives as you know, one an array of arrays, and we change it into an array of objects. Maybe do some kind of calculations, but some fairly basic capabilities. Now with scripted integrations, you can connect to any API that's available over HTTP. So that means that as well as JSON, you might retrieve XML or even text, perhaps even binary data over HTTP. And so your script becomes arbitrary JavaScript functions. Anything you can do in JavaScript, you can pretty much do in one of these scripts. And this whole tutorial that we'll cover in the next 40 minutes or so will show you how to build that from the ground up. Now,
and a good example of a use case, Casio, I don't know if you want to talk to what we had to do with Slack.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Slack, for example, when you get the message from a channel in Slack, it detects someone in the message. The API returns the user ID instead of the username of the user. So with scripting, yeah, and it doesn't make sense to the end user to see the user ID, right? And with scripting, we were able to access the Slack's user table and replace the user ID with the username and save it and show that for the user. And also, there are some like HR systems that returns some HTML tags inside the ticket's body, for example, and we are also able to remove that tags before we save that on our database.
Right. Yeah, so HTML code in the message, so we were able to kind of use the JavaScript capabilities to remove the HTML tags so that we could display just the message.
Right. So just reshaping the API response into something that's more useful to the micro app.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So the content I'll be working through today. So this will be published, I think, around the end of next week, this tutorial. So you're seeing this, this is literally the first presentation of this material. I should mention that the Microapp scripting, this is a preview. It's not quite generally available. Around about the end of next week is when I've been told, and somebody will probably be upset with me now for sharing a date, but it's very, very close to being generally available. So I would say to watch this space, and I'll give you spaces to watch at the end to keep up with what's going on in the world of Citrix developers. So with that, you'll be pleased to know that that is the last slide for the time being, and I'm going to jump right in. So as I mentioned, there's some prerequisites here. There's some prerequisites in getting started with microapps to get your test instance of Citrix Workspace platform. You've got to set up an identity provider in Azure and so on. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping that you'll have to do for any work with microapps. And then, as I said, you should complete this basic tutorial. I mean, obviously, if you've had some experience with microapps already, you've probably done that. But that's going to really give you a grounding, because here we're focusing on these scripts. Now, I mentioned systems of record, okay? This is where the source of truth for the data. So our system of record today is going to be an Excel workbook. So this lets us view the data and manipulate it at will. And also, Microsoft have got a really nice graph API that lets us access data in an Excel workbook on OneDrive or SharePoint. Okay, the API is identical whether it's on OneDrive or SharePoint. I happen to have this in OneDrive right now. And I've got my, I'm committing the usual sin of using a spreadsheet as a database, and I've got my beer spreadsheet here. So my goal then is to synchronize that list of beers into the microapp service and to allow people to add to it. So the first thing that I've got to do is register an application with the Microsoft Identity Platform. So today we're working with Microsoft in particular. This is common to whichever API provider you're going to be using. So Alex and Casio mentioned Slack. If you're going to be working with the Slack API, you have to go into the Slack developer portal and create your client app so that you have so that Slack knows that you're going to be calling those APIs and gives you some kind of credential to do so. So we're going to be doing that with Azure. So the procedure here is we go into Azure Active Directory and we want to add an app registration. So we go to app registrations here, and then we have a new registration. We can see we've been doing a few of those in the past. And I'm going to call this one CUGC webinar. And we get to choose who is going to access this API. So we could say, okay, I'm just going to restrict this to my own tenant. So that would be only accounts within your AD infrastructure. You could say any organizational directory. I'm going to widen it up to personal Microsoft accounts because that's exactly what I'm using over here. Now this redirect URI, this is part of the plumbing between Microsoft and Citrix Cloud for passing information back and forth. I can leave that blank for now, but I'm going to have to fill it in later. So if I hit register there, so what we've done is we've got down to here, we've left that blank and we've hit register. So now we've created our application and we have all of these IDs. So this I don't know why Microsoft have to give us 3. We need to keep note of this application ID, this client ID. So I'm going to copy that and paste it into my clipboard, which is usefully off screen. And so that's going to be how our application, or in fact, our Microapp identifies itself to Microsoft. Now, we have to do a little bit more housekeeping here. We need to know how to send the user over to Microsoft to authorize access. So we need this authorization endpoint. I'll copy that and put it over here. And oops, we need the token endpoint. So these are part of the OAuth flow that we'll see in a few minutes when we authorize the Microapp to access information at Microsoft. So with that, we have to create a secret. So we go down to certificates and secrets. So our client secret is something that we share with Microsoft to say, okay, you know this is me. It's basically like a password. So I can create a new one and I'll call it CUGC webinar. And I'll add that. And what happens is that we can copy this and then I'm going to go away from it. And if you manage to copy that down in that amount of time or screenshot it, then congratulations. And that's really going to be how our application proves that it is the beer Microapp when it asks for data. Now, there's one more bit of housekeeping we need to do. We need to tell Microsoft which APIs we're going to be calling. So this whole system is set up for secure access to your data in Microsoft in this case, and giving just the level of access that's required and no more. So this is where we add the required permissions. So I'm going to go into Microsoft Graph. Now the first thing I'm going to need is I'm going to be accessing the API as a signed in user, and I'm going to need offline access. So my Microapp is going to want to be synchronizing getting data when the user isn't actually present. So then the other two things I need are access to files. So here's where you see the granularity. I can say I only want to read files that belong to that user. Okay, so I'm narrowing down access to what I need and no more. So this is for OneDrive, and it so happens that for SharePoint, there's a corresponding permission in Sites to say, okay, let me read from the SharePoint site. So in this way, we constrain the Microapp to have read-only access to only a few elements of data in Microsoft, and it can't go and read my email or create or modify documents in any way. And again, this concept is common to almost every API you'll be interacting with, and OAuth calls it scopes. It's the scope of your API access. So with that, we've done everything we need, and we can create our integration in Citrix Cloud. So here I'm in the Citrix Cloud console. I've requested my Microapps test instance. It's valid for a little bit longer than most people's because I have a little bit of admin power here. But this is exactly what you'll see, okay? I'll go into Microapps, let the spinner spin for a second. Come on. It's always that great time in a demo when it's like, is this gonna work? There we go. So there's the one I did earlier. But what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add an integration. And there are different kinds of integrations. As I mentioned before, we could look at all of the off-the-shelf integrations. And I believe, Alex, I believe A2K wrote at least one of these, didn't you?
Yeah, we've got Slack, Ivanti, we've got Oracle coming up, SolarWinds coming up, and SAP. So yeah, we're actually contributing quite a bit here. And then we also are about to publish a COVID appointment tracker for vaccines. And that's just going to be free to anybody that wants it. So that was kind of an interesting project. We found that an open source group was publishing appointments from all the major providers, and so we were able to leverage that. And you can put a zip code in and see all the appointments available near you.
Nice. All right. So these are the off-the-shelf integrations, as I said, that are already configured up for all of these systems. But I'm going to be building my own one. So I'm going to say continue, and I'm going to call it CUGC webinar, and I need to put in a base URL. So this is where my API is located, and here it's graph Microsoft.com/1.0. I can change the icon. There we go. This one I've been working with earlier. Now, if my API was on premises, I could say so and use the connector to get to it, but it's on the public cloud, and I'm going to use OAuth 2. So this is where I have to start pasting in things that I got from Microsoft. So it's using the authorization code flow, which is, this will look exactly the same as when you give an app access to your data somewhere. So I have to start pasting in these URLs I got from the UI there. So I can say the authorization URL, the token URL, that's all good. The refresh happens to be the same as the token. The list of scopes is exactly those ones I picked out. So I happen to have them in the tutorial there. And then my client ID and client secret. And so I have that. And then the client secret here. I think that's all I need to set. So I can just go paste that in. Ah, nice. Hit it for me. Okay, so the client ID, client secret, and we have our integration. So this is where, if we were working with a regular micro app, we could start setting up the endpoint and tables and so on, but we're actually going to write a script. So the last thing we need to do in terms of configuration, you'll remember that we had that redirect URI that we left blank. So our micro app knows how to get to Microsoft. So basically it's going to redirect the user to this URL to log into Microsoft. Microsoft has to know where to send the user back. So that's exactly what's going on here. So I go back to Azure and I say, what do I say here? Click add a platform to authentication, click web. Okay. So authentication, add a platform. It's going to be a web API we're working with, a web application, and I just fill that in and say configure. You don't need to change any of the other defaults. Okay, now everything's connected up. We can actually authorize this integration to access my data. So let's see if we can get that working. So we're going to say authorize. Now what's going on is, this will be familiar to almost anybody in the modern world. An application is wanting to access my data. I'm sure everybody's been through this, but this is the scopes that I set up showing up in English. So sign me in, read my profile, that was the basic default one. Maintain access to data, so that was offline access. Have full access to your files, files.read. Edit or delete items in all site collections. Oh, that shouldn't be right. That should be read only. I'm not quite sure why it thinks it needs to do that, but I'm going to blame Microsoft for that, since I said sites read all. Anyway, so let's accept. And okay, so we have authorized access, and I just realized I gave it access to my data in SharePoint. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I've got OneDrive and SharePoint accounts going on here, so we'll just carry on for now and fix that later. Okay, so at this point, authorization is successful. Okay, so the Microapp service has a token it can use to call APIs at this base address on behalf of my user. And you know, in the real world, this would probably be kind of some service user, some API user you've configured with those minimal permissions to do what they need to do. Now we get into writing the script. Now we have to interact with a number of concepts. So the very first one we have to figure out is how we define that integration. So rather than going in the UI here and saying, okay, I've got a column with name, I've got a column with alcohol, and I've got a brewery, we actually do that in code. So let's copy that code and go into scripting. And I think this is new for Alex and Casio, because they had to upload their scripts as files before, but now I can actually edit the script in here, paste in code. And the really nice thing here is it's going to show me any kind of errors here. It's going to highlight things and say it found an issue. So it's aware of JavaScript syntax. So it's really a nice user interface here. So we've said we've got our synchronization, we've got a dummy function to get beers, it's just going to say hello, and we've got our 3 columns here. So as soon as we save that, that's parsed, and we know that we've got, this is all set up, got our primary key here, and we can say import, and now we have technically a working integration. So let's open this link in another tab, because we're going to be flipping backwards and forwards a little bit here. So over here, we can say, run the synchronization. And all that's going to do is call that get beers method. And the system doesn't care that no data was returned. I mean, this is in the real world, there may be no data to fetch. But we can go into here, if I click the right button, dumb thing. Let's just go in again here. Please don't do this. Synchronization. View logs. Try again. Okay. What you would have seen.
This is how you can tell when it's live.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what you would have seen would be hello world. So we'll carry on and assume that it would have actually said that, and everything is working fine. You see, there we go. That's what it says. Hello world. I've done this before. It does really work. Okay, we'll assume there's some transient problem there. We can just carry on. Okay, so we didn't get any data there. So what it's useful to do before we actually really start connecting to the endpoint is have a look at the structure of data that we're expecting. We interact with this data store object here. So that's given as a a property and an object to our function. So we get that data store and we can actually save data. And it's a very simple data structure here. So it's an array with an object for each record. And you'll notice here that the property names are identical in every respect to that model we declared up here. Okay, so this is important. They are case sensitive. And so one of the first issues I got into was lowercase name here and uppercase elsewhere, and it just says property not found or missing primary key. Those are the kind of errors you're going to get. But I can copy that and go back to my code here. I can go in, I can select it all, paste over it. So now, did I paste over it? Oh, I have to edit first. I can paste over it, and here's my beers. So now I've got just 2 beers that my synchronization is going to do. Oh, I know what I did. Sorry. I didn't follow the instructions. I pasted over the whole thing instead of just my function. Okay, so it's going to just give me 2 beers when I synchronize. Hopefully, the synchronization will work and show me the results. Otherwise, I'll just have to show you in the tutorial. So why is my mouse going weird? Okay, so we're synchronizing. It's just going to return those 2 beers, those 2 hard-coded beers. And this is quite vexing, but no matter. Luckily, I can see that it would say 3 overall changes applied. And where I can actually go and see the results is if I go back to here and look in my tables, I can see the table definition that comes from the schema I defined. So, and then I can see that I have my 2 beers. So this is exactly what came from my code. Okay, so we've got some data landing in the data store, but it's not really coming from anywhere. This is where we can start to build out the script. So the first thing that we're going to want to do, that workbook lives in a particular location in SharePoint. So we need to get that into the integration. Now, what we could do is start kind of hard coding. It's called beers.xlsx and put that in the code, but that's just never, ever a good idea. What instead we have are these integration parameters. So if we overwrite the script, or at least overwrite the correct piece of the script, what are we doing this time? Replace the entire script with the following code. Great. So we replace the script, and I'll show you the changes that I'm making. So let's go into the full screen editor this time, paste this in. So what I've done is I've got some integration parameters. So this lets the administrator set up the workbook path and the name of the table. So it's your administrator that's going to see this when they're configuring the micro app. End users are never going to see this. This is configuration data. And then in our function, we get past this integration parameters, and then we just log them again. So with that, we can save that, and we get an integrity warning because we now have 2 parameters that weren't there before. They're going to need to be configured. So yeah, I'm going to update that, and I'm going to go to my configuration. And what we should see is that our 2 parameters that we defined have appeared here. So I set the workbook path, and I go to my handy little crib sheet here. It's going to remind me how I actually set it up. So let's just grab that there. So this is where my workbook is in OneDrive or SharePoint. And you can see there's a default value here we configured for the table name. It's still called table 1, so that's all good. So we can save there. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go around the loop of running the synchronization again. But basically what would happen is that this is going to show the workbook path and the table that we just configured. So now is when the rubber starts to meet the road. We can actually start to reach out into the API. We've got everything we need to start doing that. So again, let's copy the code and then I'll explain what's going on. So back to scripting. And again, we just want to replace just that top bit. We need to hit edit first. I think I might ask the engineers to make it kind of implied when you click in there. So paste that in, look, see what we've got. Okay, we've defined an array of keys. They're going to be useful to us rather than, we define that up front rather than just having them hidden in the code down here, because we're going to use them in a couple of places once we get started. And here we have another API object. We have this client object. So this is how we access data. We say client.fetch, and that actually calls into the Microapps service. And you'll notice that all we're providing to this is the URL. We're not providing any tokens, secrets, passwords, because that's already been handled by the service. And the fetch method will add those on in the standard OAuth locations and fill all of that in for us. And thank you. My handsome assistant just brought me a very welcome cup of tea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're there where you can see that we build this URL up from that workbook path and the table name there. So that's how we build that up. That's exactly what the Graph API is going to want. And then this is an asynchronous method. When it completes, we want to take the response and parse it as JSON. And our script's going to wait for that to happen and put it in this data. And then we dump it to the screen. And then there's a really interesting statement here. We've got a lot going on here, and I actually break it out in the tutorial. You know, this, I mean, if you've not done much JavaScript, this will just look like hieroglyphics, but I can explain what's going on here. What's going to happen is that the data that's retrieved has this format. Okay, so we can see what's going on here. It's basically rows from the table. It's a very different format from what the data store is expecting. Okay, we've got an array of with values, which is an array with an array of actual values from the table. So it's you know, it's easy to see what's going on, but it's quite different from what we want. Now, this is the transformation we do. Now that first piece, the flat map, that's really useful. That just looks into that value and extracts that array, that values array, those values elements. So it looks at each of these and says, okay, I just want this thing, and this thing. And the result of that is this, which is much closer to what we want, but it's not quite there. This MapReduce, you know, don't try and you can look at the documentation on these things. It's a very terse syntax, but what it's basically doing is it's combining that array of keys with the array of data, and it's outputting exactly what we want: objects with keys and values. So that's exactly what our system's going to want here. So what we're going to do, we're going to save this. And this is really the moment of truth here. We update, and then we go to our synchronization here. So this is where we see if it's all going to work. We hit play. So is it going to say, is it going to stay finished? It's going to finish successfully. Come on, it takes a little bit longer because it's actually, what? So
Live demos.
yeah, I know. I've been here. At least I'm not actually live on stage suffering in front of people. I'm sitting comfortably here with a cup of tea. But if the demo gods had been smiling, if we had logs, we could diagnose what's going on. But luckily, I have saved everything that should be happening, and we would get that table preview. Actually, I don't believe anything will be different here. No, we've still got just the 2 that we hard coded. We would have more beer if it had worked, and we would be able to see that in the table preview.
And more
Which
beer is always
exactly
good.
is what a Brit wants, right? More beer.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and then the idea is we can go over here. So since the engineering team happens to be based in Prague, I have a Czech beer here that I could paste in, Pilsner Urquell, which I highly recommend you try. It's very, very nice beer for a lager. And we can paste that in. And again, if we reran the synchronization, let's just try it, just because I'm not gonna give up on it. Synchronization. Let's just waste the 2 seconds to see if this is going to work here. Starting, running.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay, but we can use my crib sheet here and see that if this was working, we'd have another entry here. So we can see it here rather than over here. But believe me, it really does work when I don't have 100 people watching. Okay, so the next thing is that when things go wrong, okay, you can imagine that we've got our admin here. They're kind of going a bit too quickly. Oh, I see. I see exactly why it's not working. We had the wrong path on here. So I had XLS instead of XLSX. So actually this is really interesting. So what the log would be showing us if we were able to get in would be that we started and we received an error here. Item does not exist because this path was actually wrong, okay? Because this is XLSX. So we did things a little bit out of order. And then if we went in, we'd see some kind of cryptic error here, can't read property flat map of undefined. And basically what's happened is that fetch has worked. It brought us back data, but then when we tried to look at it, there was just an error message. There wasn't the data we expected. So we can start to do some error handling. So what we do here is we catch the error. The problem is that fetch, as far as fetch is concerned, the API completed, but it returned an error, but it's still completed. It's still going to give us the data. So this is when we can copy an error handler, and then again, we go back into our code here, edit, and then we can put that at the top. So our error handler just says, okay, if the OK flag is set in the response, I'm going to log success and return it. Otherwise, I'm actually going to throw a new error. I'm going to put some sensible error codes in there. So I'm going to put the response status and text. So one more thing we need to do, we need to build that into our function here. So this is really nice, this syntax. This is called promises, where we say, okay, do this, then validate the response, and then parse it to JSON. So this is going to happen in between. So let's save that. And I'm actually going to go correct the config here and see if we can't get some data. So I'm going to save. I'm going to update here. So we're just doing this in a slightly different order. We had a couple of errors. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, I'm actually looking at a different table. I opened this on my work account, and sorry, it's going to show me a slightly different table. But I can see my 3 beers then. Let's see if I can update it. Here here we go. I'm going to fly by the seat of my pants now and try finding the URL. Bear with me. So if I search for biz.xlsx, let's copy that URL from there. This is a great thing with having this. This is actually Citrix CMAD that I'm using here with a remote desktop. Okay, so now let's copy that one and paste it into here. Hopefully everybody can follow what's going on here. I've actually got the same spreadsheet and that saves there. Okay, so now we can go do another synchronize. We can get rid of this thing because it's no longer relevant. And it's finished, and we go there and we look at the table. Let's just make sure it refreshes, and we do that. I think I might have been just a bit quick there. The problem with this is it kind of saves when it thinks you've finished working, and it's not, it doesn't always get it done in time. It's all asynchronous cloud-based systems. So we're starting here. Didn't have time to get my tea. Any luck with the logs? No, but let's just do a full refresh here. Let's go, let's go. Yes! Oh, yay, it worked, it worked. We have a real system. So let's just recap. We got 3 beers. We went to our spreadsheet. We added a 4th. We ran another synchronization, and it's now appearing. So at this point, you know, if you've worked with microapps, you would know that you can start building out some UI, right? You can have notifications for the user when new beers appear. You can have every morning, you could have the current beer list appearing for your users and start building up all of that good stuff. But I'm not going to do that because we're actually focusing on the integration. I want to concentrate on this action. So we're reading data from the system of record. I want to write data to the system of record. Oh, and we're actually running out of time. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll very quickly scroll down and just give you the view of this. What we would do is we would add that function. Sorry about that. The errors put us behind a little bit. We would import a microapp, and then we would subscribe a user to that. And then we would actually be able to go in as a user. So this is the user eye view over here that I was talking about, having your actions and your activity feed. We'd be able to add one and a bit more code here to post it into the spreadsheet, and it would appear there totally, absolutely as planned if we had not spent so much time troubleshooting. So with that, I will take any questions. We have a minute or two for questions if they've come up while we've been talking. Go ahead.
All right, so we have 3 questions. This is from James and Carol. Can we use this to link into share file?
Absolutely, yes. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've done here. Is I have this is actually living in share file. So if I go over here, yeah, this is real share file. So I'm not gonna, sorry, share file, SharePoint. Yes,
Okay.
Yes, share file as well. You could use this to link it to share file. I believe there is an off the peg integration for doing just that. Sorry,
okay.
My apologies.
All right, next question. How do we, or better, should we change the authorization URL in line with our corporate password policy? If so, can it be done while users are using the app?
So the authorization URL here, you shouldn't need to change this URL. The client ID and secret here, you can absolutely change. because what's happening is this is populating the cache inside the Microapp service. This is what we're looking at here. And so, you know, you could go in and change any amount of the configuration, and that cache would still be there. So you could totally, you could totally update these client IDs and secrets and reauthorize the application, and users would be none the wiser.
Okay, all right, last question. Micro apps are presented within the workspace. Is there also an integration with Microsoft Insights? This tool helps with time management and notification on outstanding questions. This way you would see all in workspace instead of 2 locations.
Oh, I thought that was going to be a dig at my poor timekeeping on the webinar. It does not. No, this is specific to Citrix Workspace, and in particular the Citrix Workspace with Intelligence feature. So
just to add on the question about the URL, if you have an identity provider like Okta, et cetera, and say you've got single sign-on into Microsoft, you would point it to Okta for the authentication, and that's where the OAuth would start.
Right. Yeah, good point. You can have these things can basically form a chain of authorizations, and that's in fact when we use this internally at Citrix. That's exactly what we do. We use Okta as our corporate identity provider, and then Okta in turn authenticates to Microsoft, Salesforce, and everyone else. Okay, so
we have one more, but you may want to take this one offline because it's 4 questions from the same person. So you may want to answer that offline instead of probably spending 15 minutes answering all these 4 questions.
I absolutely promise to do that on my Scout's honor. I will answer those.
All right, and those questions are from Brandon, and so you can answer those, and then they'll be included in the transcript that CUGC will send out.
Okie dokes. All right, so wrapping up then, that Microapp learning journey, that's available at this bit.ly link, bit.ly/microapp-journey. You can follow us on Twitter, Citrix Developer, and we now have a LinkedIn page. Don't type the URL in, just search for Citrix Developer, you'll find it. And we also have a monthly newsletter. So bit.ly/ctx-dev-news, all developer focused, just once a month. We don't want to spam your inbox every day. And that's where any of those channels are going to be where you find out about microapp scripting becoming generally available in the next couple of weeks, and this tutorial being available online. So with that, I would like to give my co-presenters a big thank you, Alex and Cassio, and over to you, Stephanie, to give away the goodies.
Okay, let me grab the screen back. Thanks, everyone. Let me find my window. All right, still looks like a big black white box. All right, let's try that again. Now it's time for me to have fun.
There we go.
Technology. Okay, let's put it in the right. Nope. Not Slack. We don't want Slack.
It's just the day for it, isn't it?
It really is. Okay, so I gotta get the question out, the question pane out. I got some trivia questions, and it's like I said, it's Star Wars Day. This is all Star Wars related. All right, so the first question: who really shot first?
I had to stop myself there.
That's right. It was Han, and it was edited in 1997 to make it look like Greedo did those cheats. So Daniel Garcia, congrats. I'm writing down. Okay, next question. Which species stole the plans for the Death Star? I think everybody's Googling this one. Oh, somebody got Daniel. Okay, Daniel, you can't win twice. Somebody else has to have it besides Daniel.
There you go. You got Michael.
Okay, there we go. Michael, that's right. It was the Boffins. I'm not even sure if I can say that correctly. All right, Michael. That's a lot of vowels
Honstein?
together. Honstein.
Honstein? Sorry, Michael. Sorry,
Sorry,
Michael.
Michael.
Forgive us.
And third question, what does ADAT stand for?
I sense some Googling going on in the force.
Yeah, I think I can get 3 of those letters.
Bang, bang. I like bang, bang. Yep. Who, let me make sure. Okay, no, we got it. All right, all-terrain armored transport.
Corey.
Good job, Corey. All right, I will email each of you afterwards to get your information. Where'd my mouse go? And let's see if my little movie will play. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Thank you, Alex and Cassio and Pat and Webster. Thanks for being on
Thank
this
you.
today. Appreciate it.
All right.
All
Thank you.
right. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and that we see you at another CUGC event soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.